Welcome to the Bar Exam Toolbox podcast. Today we are talking about goal setting and changing bad bar exam study habits. Your Bar Exam Toolbox hosts are Alison Monahan and Lee Burgess. That's me. We're here to demystify the bar exam experience so you can study effectively, stay sane, and hopefully pass and move on with your life. We're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the career-related website Career Dicta. Alison also runs the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review on your favorite listening app and check out our sister podcast, the Law School Toolbox podcast. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach us via the contact form on barexamtoolbox.com, and we'd love to hear from you. And with that, let's get started.
Welcome back to the Bar Exam Toolbox podcast. Today, we're discussing goal setting and changing bad habits. Now, in general, we're not really big fans of resolutions or commitments to sweeping change because, well, we know studies show that resolutions or any sort of big shift like that typically don't really lead to lasting changes. But what if you are practicing bad habits and you can see that? Maybe you see some self-sabotaging behavior, or you're just not getting things done while you're studying for the bar. I mean, this is a problem. What do you do to try to make changes if these big sweeping changes are pretty much guaranteed to fail?
Yeah, and I think we've all had this in our life, right?
Yeah. Like, I'm going to go to the gym every single day for 2 hours. And it's like, that's probably not likely to happen if I never go to the gym at all. And that's probably for pretty valid reasons. You know, you're busy, whatever.
Right.
Lazy. I don't know.
Yeah. But anytime you kind of commit to something in this very absolutist way, I'm going to, run 5 miles a day until you get sick. I remember training for a half marathon, which I never ended up running. I was in this I'm training for running things period of my life. And I got the flu for a couple of days and I just stopped running.
Yeah.
It was
it's valid.
I never went back. I think I trained for another 5K, but I never finished training for the half marathon because I was just well, there it goes, and that's not really the best way to.
Yeah. 2 days off the schedule. May as well be done with it.
Right. Exactly. So I am really interested in this issue because I think that we all are always trying to be better versions of ourselves. And I know that you and I frequently talk about the things that we're working on in our own lives to be better people. And I think around the bar exam, you probably have a few habits that you want to do to be better. And so I kind of nerd out on this kind of stuff. And around the new year, when all of these articles get passed around about resolutions and changing habits, I read one that I thought actually said something different, which was really awesome. And what it was about was this idea of shrinking change. And I'm going to link to it in the show notes. But the premise is basically that even in our aim high culture, we're all trying to be uber successful. You are more likely to achieve your goals when they are small and attainable. So this is what people are referring to as shrinking the change. You're not trying to do something really massive. You're trying to do something very small and watch it build on each piece, almost like you're going up a change ladder. And I think what's interesting about this idea is that it doesn't involve this judgment on ourselves that we do not have enough willpower. Because I think as type A people, we often say, oh, well, if I should just be able to get this done.
I should just power through.
Power through
the flu and keep training for that marathon.
Right, yeah. But there's a body of research now called willpower depletion, which is the idea that willpower is just a limited resource. And you can feel like you don't have enough of it. I don't know. Do you ever feel like you don't have enough willpower?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I try not to really rely on willpower because I recognize that I just don't actually have very much of it.
I think that's very self-aware.
Yeah, I mean, for a really long time in my life, I was one of those people who thought I could just power through everything, and I kind of did, and it made me unhappy and crazy. Mm-hmm. So now I just recognize, I'm you know what? I'm actually kind of a lazy person. I think I even have an article on the Girls Guide to Law School site about Napoleon's version of being lazy and smart. And I was as soon as I heard that, I was yep, I'm smart and lazy. That's just what I am. I'm cool with that.
But when you put your mind to it, you can get an amazing amount of stuff done.
Well, no, that was his whole point. We'll link to this article because it was somebody told me about this and it's really applicable because his point was the people you want, as your generals running the show, are the people who are smart and lazy because we're constantly thinking of ways that we and other people can do less work.
That's true. I
Yeah, those are the people you put in charge.
Yeah.
They're always trying to make it like less hard to do things.
Which is better than the law firm partner I remember meeting with us and saying, like, why don't you think you should have to work on Saturdays? Saturday is another day for working.
So yeah, and you're like, or for doing other things that are more fun than working.
Yeah. So if you kind of subscribe to this idea that willpower is a limited resource, the example this article gave was that it's self-control or willpower is like a cell phone battery that charges while you rest. When you wake up, it's full, but it's going to continue to run down over the day. So it will drain your brain. Lack of willpower will negatively impact your cognition and functioning, so you cannot reach your goals. And I thought this was interesting because one of the things we work with our students about all the time on is this idea of how to make sure their brain is its best self. And I hadn't really thought before reading this article about this idea that even depleting our willpower is going to prevent us from having enough energy to do these other cognitive tasks that we need to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely right. I think that's why sometimes you read about, very high functioning people who need to be really efficient in their work life or whatever, who are trying to eliminate choices throughout the day. For example, like what to wear, what to eat, there are lots of these stories. Steve Jobs wore the same thing. Mark Zuckerberg has a closet full of the same t-shirt. Barack Obama, basically his only choice was, do I wear a red tie or a blue tie? These are things that you might think are minor, but if you spend 20 minutes every morning thinking about what to wear, like that's depleting your power of, your thinking. And it does, the more choices you're making, I think it's the harder it is to really sit and focus on any one thing.
Yeah. I think around food, there are also people who get very regimented, like they eat the same thing for breakfast every day.
Yep, that's me. Always, if I have anything other than my sourdough toast, which probably I made, plus one fried egg with salt and pepper, plus English breakfast tea with milk and honey and 2 glasses of ice water.
Yeah.
And once I get off that, I'm the last week or so, I wasn't having that because I was traveling, and it was every morning I was like, oh my God, what am I going to eat? Do I have to go someplace? Do I have food here? Oh my God. It was actually really depleting.
Yeah. I also always am shocked. The first thing I do in the morning when I get downstairs with my kids is I drink cold brew coffee mixed with something because I don't want to take the time to make coffee. So I open the fridge and I go to reach for the coffee. And then it's I go to reach for the oat milk or almond milk or something. And if it's not there, I have this crisis moment, because it's such a habit. And I try and make sure that the fridge is continually stocked. But it's the other day I went to reach in for the milk and it was gone where it usually was. And I was just oh no, what am I to do?
Yeah, exactly. No, I totally get that. I mean, I have a backup stash. I basically buy my milk in bulk. And so then only once every 3 or 4 months do you have to reach in and find that your extra supply is gone. And it's oh, how could this happen?
I buy the cold pressed coffee in bulk. It's in these big bottles that you just pour out a little bit. The only danger is if it was a night when you got up really early, sometimes I'm a little too generous with the cold press and then I suffer after that. But all of this stuff, it makes you feel a little disjointed if you don't have your life organized and your processes laid out. And the more, you can remove these decisions or these kind of freak out moments, the more energy you have for other things.
I think for bar stuff, the key point is if you're freaking out over what you should be doing, that's depleting energy from actually doing things.
Right. And I think this is a unique challenge for people who are working and studying, because if you are studying full time, you can kind of say, okay, I'm going to clean up my life and try and minimize my my other distractions or my decisions that I have to make and really just focus on what I'm doing. But if you're working, you are going to go to work and your willpower bank or battery is probably going to be incredibly depleted by what you're being asked to do at the office. And so if that is happening and every night you are just zonked and you're not able to focus, you want to think about your schedule and see if you can move some stuff around so you can get a better self to study a few hours of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also cognitive switching is also a big source of kind of mental depletion. So if you're working, say 8 hours a day, which would be a pretty, not even that intense work schedule for most lawyers, and then you're expected to come and switch into this other mode, that can be very difficult. It can be difficult, sometimes people think like, oh, well, I'll just study for an hour during the day or whatever. But again, like whenever you're going back and forth between things, it's not that you can't do it, but it becomes harder.
Yeah. So the idea that this article was kind of presenting is that when you shrink your goals, it then doesn't take as much willpower to cause change. And so you don't have this willpower depletion, and you are setting yourself up for success. And so the guy who wrote this article is a man by the name of Chris Kresser. He actually runs something called the Center for Functional Medicine out of Berkeley. He does all sorts of interesting stuff around food and health, and he's an acupuncturist, but he's moved into the medical space, and it's fascinating stuff. If you like to geek out on that kind of stuff, I'd recommend looking him up. But in this article, he uses the example of trying to start a meditation practice. And so instead of putting as your goal, I'm going to devote 1 hour a day to a meditation practice, because that's never going to happen for most of us unless you go to a yoga retreat and maybe then you're meditating for an hour a day.
I spent 2 weeks at a yoga retreat in Costa Rica over the holidays. And let me tell you, it was real easy to like do yoga every day, eat healthy. Why? Because somebody else prepared all the food. Somebody else scheduled my day. I had nothing else pressing to do. The Wi-Fi was pretty crap. It was just like, oh, well, looks like I'm on bank right now for a 10 a.m. yoga class. Okay, great. Yeah. And then I came back into my normal life and was like, oh, I want to keep doing this. I want to eat like, the lovely type of food they prepared for me. And it becomes a lot harder.
Yeah, exactly. So if you want to start incorporating these things, and if you want your long-term goal to be something like, I want to devote an hour a day to meditation, you can start with very, very small pieces. So Chris outlines that the first thing you could do would be to find a space in your house conducive to meditation. Almost like medication, but it's just meditation. So you might need to like make a space and reorganize a space, and then that could be the next task. But this is like the granular levels of each one of these tasks. So you find a space conducive to meditation, then you buy a meditation cushion, then you download a meditation app, then you use the app once a week to meditate for 1 minute at a time. And then you use the app 2 days next week to meditate for 2 minutes each time. And so I think for a lot of high achievers, you might have a moment where you're like, this doesn't feel like I'm making any changes. But if you kept going on this path, then you would have regular, longer meditation sessions in not that long in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, it's funny because when you said that, was like 1 day a week for 1 minute. No, you should do every minute a day, like 1 day every minute, at least for that first week. And then I was like, well, actually, if you follow the schedule in 7 weeks, you would be meditating every day for 7 minutes. So maybe there's something to this.
Right. But you probably wouldn't feel the load of trying to take on that additional meditation.
Right. I was like, 1 day a week. That's so lazy.
I know. I did the same thing because we're type A high achievers.
Like you could do at least 3 days a week that first week.
I know. And then I wonder if we'd still be doing it 7 weeks later. Probably not. So I think that's what struck me when I read this article for the first time. It was this idea that it almost felt silly to make these very small, tiny changes, but that they actually have the likelihood that they're going to stick and build on each other. And, it's always interesting because you go back to how we work with kids, and like we are so much kinder to kids than we are to adults most of the time. And so like if you need to do every time leading up to the time change, they always I'm on a lot of sleep consultant lists. I'll just be honest, and I won't bore everyone with like sleep in my household and discussion about that. But I get a lot of these emails that's like, the time change is coming. And they never say, you know what? You should just shift your kid's schedule by an hour. They'll be like, take 7 days and move the kid's schedule by like 5 minutes the first day, 10 minutes, or do it over 2 weeks or something like that. So it's like the kid's system isn't completely shocked. Of course, what do I do to my own schedule? I just change my clock and let myself feel like crap.
Yeah, exactly. For like weeks on end.
Right. And so
you're like, I'm just going to get it all over within 1 day. And then you feel terrible for the next week. And it's like, oh, I probably could have done it in a week and not felt as bad if I hadn't tried to do this all at once.
Exactly. So I thought he gave in this article an example about sleeping more, which is something we oftentimes talk to our bar studiers about, because lack of sleep leads to all sorts of problems, health problems, mental capacity problems, anxiety, you name it. If you don't sleep, you can't function very well. And so, little things like maybe start turning off your electronics and turning the lights down a half an hour to an hour before bedtime. Like, there's no one who couldn't meet that goal, really. Like, it's like, just turn off your cell phone, like turn down the lights. And then maybe the next,
get off Instagram.
Yeah, exactly. Get off Instagram. And then maybe the next goal is go to bed 5 minutes earlier for the next week, and then go to bed 10 minutes earlier than the next week. And all of a sudden, 6 weeks in, you're sleeping a whole extra hour a day. And, that adds up. And so really starting to think about these small attainable goals, which, sometimes it's like, this really works against how I feel like I should be able to set goals. But every time I try and implement this type of a change in my life, it seems to work.
Yeah, exactly. Even with like the yoga thing, when I came back from the retreat and was like, I'm going to go like do yoga. And I was like, okay, well, realistically, I'm not going to like find a class, pay for the class, go to the class, leave my house. Okay, so that's off the table. Big goal, go every day to the yoga studio, not happening. And I was like, well, what if I found online? So then I found like an online version of the place I used to go in San Francisco. And I was like, okay, this is great. But then, so day 1 was I found it. Day 2 was I signed up for a free trial. Day 3 was I actually tried a class. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to start with one of the half-hour classes. Like, let's keep it simple. And then I found out I really liked it. And so I did the half hour, and then I did some more. But I don't know, maybe I was sort of like, it hasn't really stuck because then I started traveling and the free trial expired and whatever. But, it did work for like a little while.
Yeah. And I think that at least it allows us to try to implement new things, and now maybe if you were home and you said, okay, I'm going to do one 30-minute class a week. That's what we can talk. I've been trying to get yoga back into my life, which I haven't done since my baby was born. And I am one of those people who is like, I will go to 3 yoga classes a week. And then like, there's no way, like I'm super busy. It's like, I have 2 kids and a job and not gonna happen.
As soon as you don't go to 3 one week, then it's like, all right, done.
Right. And
failed at that. Feeling bad about myself. Moving on.
Exactly. But then I'm like, okay, I will go to 1 yoga class a week. And then I did that for 1 week. And then the next week it was looking rough. And so then did the same. We had been talking about online yoga. And I was like, I should just do 1 at home online yoga class for the week. And then that goal became a little challenging. And so I said, okay, I will do 1 15-minute meditation workshop from this yoga website this week. And I did the 15-minute meditation and it felt pretty good. And then I was like, why can't I at least then for now, maybe all I can do is say, I'm going to add in this 1 15-minute meditation,
Hey, you got to start somewhere.
You got to start somewhere. And then maybe next week I can do 2. But it was just interesting because my goal setting, I just had to keep paring it down and saying, this is too much, and go down. So I think when you think about your bar practice, you can start to think about the hurdles in the same way. So one thing we hear a lot from bar studiers is that you're not doing enough practice. We believe you should be writing every day. Most bar studiers who are unsuccessful are not. And I think a lot of people will say, I cannot write every day. I do not have time. So you can use this same idea. Start with deciding maybe what time of day you are going to do the writing practice. Is it going to be right after your lunch break? Is it whatever it might be? And that's like decision point number 1. Then maybe the next thing you do, the next days you pick out the 2 essays that you're going to assign yourself as writing practice for that week. You can even use, our Brainy Bar Bank tool to pull heavily tested essays. Or you can use our Writing of the Week program where we actually send you an email assigning you essays to do each week. So that makes it even easier. Couldn't be simpler. So, that way you just kind of say, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And then maybe you only do 2 essays the first week, but then the next week you do 4 and the next week you do 6. Now this isn't ideal because the bar study period is very condensed, but if your option is no writing practice or some writing practice.
If your option is I will do nothing versus I'll do 6 essays a week, it's like, I'm going to take the 6 essays.
Yeah, exactly. Even if it takes you a few weeks to build that way. I think a lot of people who have gone to law school, who consider themselves high achievers, would think that a goal setting plan like this sounds, pathetic. It's like, why can't I do more? But the answer is because we're not. So this is
you're not doing that. So why worry about why that is? Just do something.
So making these incremental steps is allowing you to be successful. And that is what is important. So thinking about how you could apply this to other things in bar prep. What if you're spending too much time outlining the law and you have to pare back? This is something that's very hard for people to do. You could come up with a list of different ways that you might be able to approach this slowly and incrementally changing your habits. What if you're spending too much time passively listening to lectures? You can come up with a plan of how to wean yourself off of lecturing. What if you're not taking care of yourself? What if you're eating junk food and you're not sleeping? We've already talked about sleep, but you're not exercising. We've already heard our own yoga struggles. But, even if you find that you're eating out the whole time, committing to cooking one meal, like one large meal a week, would be something much more attainable than, not cooking any at all, or cooking one large meal yourself and then asking a friend to bring over another large meal. And that could even get you through the week. That could be a big change, especially if you're studying in the wintertime. Cold and flu season is here, and it's a tough time to study for the bar. You have to try and stay healthy. So all of these things that we've been talking about, the key is that all the little changes, all these tiny steps need to be distinct and measurable. And then you want to be able to celebrate all of the change. And that can be something simple, like literally crossing things off our list. We use Trello all the time, moving a Trello cord to a done column. But the beauty of this is our brains like it when we meet our goals. It makes us feel good because...
Yeah, exactly. And we have an article I can link to on the Girls Guide site. It was one of the first things I ever wrote that's still actually quite popular, so I think it's very effective, about, I'm sure you've heard me talk about this before, Lee, about the circles method.
Oh, yes, the circles method.
The circles method. If you are struggling with focus and feeling like you're wasting time, you're not focused, you're not getting the most out of your bar study time, I think this is an amazing technique to use. And the way it works is you get out a blank piece of paper. You basically figure out okay, this is what I need to get done today. You kind of rough out how long you think each task is going to take. So maybe you're going to spend, 2 hours working on learning some law, and then you're going to do a practice essay. Maybe you're going to do some MBE questions. Well, you figure out what those are going to take. And you draw a circle for each hour of time. And you label those. So, one might be MBE, maybe you have 2 hours of that, whatever. I don't care. It's your schedule. And then you sit down and basically turn on your timer and do whatever it is you're supposed to do. But if you work continuously for 45 or 50 minutes, you get to decide. Then you get to color in your entire circle. And it's amazing how motivating it can actually be to want to color those in and to think, okay, I just have to go 5 more minutes and then I get a break. Mm-hmm. And it's, you do get that kind of dopamine rush of I did such a great job. I get to color in this circle. And then when you look back at the end of the day, you have some tangible idea that, okay, I might feel like I should have done more, or maybe I didn't do so well in that essay and I'm feeling bad about it. But you have that tangible evidence that, look, I am working here. I am making progress towards this goal.
Yeah. And dopamine's no joke. And for those of you who don't remember what dopamine is, it is what your brain releases. It's like the feel-good neurotransmitter. And so it's responsible for pleasure, learning, and motivation. So each time you cross something off the list, each time you feel like you've been successful or fill in the circle, you get a little shot of dopamine, which makes you want to do it again because it's the pleasure principle. We do things over and over again that make us feel good. So the more things that you can be successful at, the better you're going to feel. And I think these little incremental success moments in bar study, which can be very frustrating, can help push you forward. Because even if you are not being a rock star at everything, if you are feeling like you're a rock star at something, it's going to boost your confidence and help you continue, working towards your goal.
Well, and I think this is definitely one of those cases where slow and steady really does win the game.
Yeah.
To take your half marathon example, okay, that's great that you had this big ambitious goal, but if you got derailed because you were trying too hard and then got derailed slightly and just gave up. I think, honestly, that kind of happens, I think, to a lot of people in bar study. They dive into it and they think, okay, I'm going to, follow this insane schedule and be working 12 hours a day and taking no breaks, and it's going to be awesome, and I'm going to be such a rock star. And then something happens, they don't understand a subject, or maybe they get sick, or maybe life happens, you're just tired, you can't study, and then suddenly you're only doing 6 hours that day and you feel like a failure. Well, 6 hours is still actually quite good.
Especially if you're doing productive study.
Yeah, if you were studying productively for 6 hours a day for the entire, say, 2-month period of bar study, that is way more time than most people need to pass the bar if it's actually like really focused.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, keeping your eye on the ball and remembering that these little slip-ups, they're just small little bumps in the road. They're not big failures. And
unless you turn it into a big failure.
Right.
And just stop.
The other thing is, if let's say you lose 2 hours a day or even 4 hours in a week of studying because something happened. Well, if you look at it from this small step-by-step process perspective of how can we, make these incremental gains, well, you could say, okay, to make up for this, I'm going to add 15 minutes of studying for the next however many extra days to make up for those 4 hours. And then it's like, you don't even have to feel bad about it.
Yeah. Or for me, like when I studied the second time for my second bar exam, I got 3 weeks off of work. So, it was going to be already pretty compressed. And then I immediately, as soon as I started studying, got incredibly sick to the point that I could not get out of bed for a week. And then you wake up from this illness and you're like, I have 2 weeks to study for the bar. Like, right. Oh my God, what am I going to do?
Right.
It's just like, well, you got to do what you can and hope for the best. At that point.
Yeah. So in summary, I just want to circle back with what we've learned here. That passing the bar is a super complicated goal. We're not trying to suggest that it's not. But we can't just assume that we will all have enough willpower to make ourselves study and do productive things every hour of every day. I don't have that. I don't think most people have that. But if you do need to make changes to be more productive, you can help yourself by setting these small incremental goals, shrinking the change. And as you reach those small goals, your brain will thank you with a feel-good reaction, and that's going to make you want to do it again. And then the next day will be likely more productive, and it's going to lead you down this road of success. And these are tiny things. Remember, it's like tiny. So there's no reason you can't do them.
Yeah, think about the MBE. You could even start with okay, I'll do 1 MBE question a day or 5 to start with, and then add 1 every day. And that may seem ridiculous. You're like 5 questions a day. What a waste of time. But it's not a waste of time because you're actually doing them.
Right. And this stuff compounds on each other and really grows quickly. But you don't feel the shock of the change because it's happening in such small.
It's like that horrible. Processes. Have you seen the horrible burpee challenge?
Oh no!
Oh God, it's like 100-day burpee challenge. You start with 1, and then do every day you add 1 more until you're doing 100 in a day. I'm like, it sounds like such a nightmare. But I'm like, I could do 5 or 10. Okay, I could do that. And they're like, well, that's kind of how it works, right? Yeah. Soon 100 will be nothing.
Yeah, I haven't seen the Barbie challenge. I did have some friends who chronicled their plank challenge on Facebook.
1 second or 10 seconds or whatever more.
Something like that.
I think that's more doable for me than burpees. I just really hate burpees.
I've always hated burpees. I had a trainer once who just was obsessed with the burpee.
Oh, they all are.
I know. It does make you feel really crummy, so I guess that's why it's good
I'm
for
like,
you.
well, I guess if everybody hates it, it probably actually works.
So, hey, if you need to add an exercise at home, try a burpee challenge. Why not?
Yeah, try 1 burpee per day.
1 burpee per day.
You'll let us know how it goes. We'll be like, wow, that's awesome that you're doing 30 burpees in a month.
Exactly. That is very impressive. All right. Well, with that, I think we're out of time. I want to take a second to remind you to check out our blog at barexamtoolbox.com, which is full of helpful tips to help you prepare and stay sane as you study for the bar exam. You can also find information on our website about our courses, tools, and one-on-one tutoring programs to support you as you study for the UBE or California bar exam. We work with many foreign-trained attorneys as well. If you enjoyed this episode of the Bar Exam Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review and rating on your favorite listening app. We'd really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. If you are still in law school, you might also like to check out our popular Law School Toolbox podcast. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Alison at lee@barexamtoolbox.com or allison@barexamtoolbox.com, or you can always contact us via our website contact form at barexamtoolbox.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.